Okay, in this video we're going to talk about something called x-axis reflection. So, x-axis reflection, if we want to think of our chart, draw a little grid. That's the x-axis, that's the y-axis. So we're going to think, what happens to a graph when it's flipped about the x-axis? So, we're not going to think about it right away. I'm just going to show you what the graph looks like, and then we'll look at what's happening. So, x-axis reflection you might see written as negative y equals f of x, or y equals negative f of x. So, these mean the same thing, right? If I had negative y equals f of x, if I was to divide that by negative 1, negative y divided by negative 1. Negative divided by a negative is a positive. Y equals, and then positive f of x divided by negative 1 would be negative f of x. And so you can see that these are really, it means the same thing, it's just in disguise. So let's start with the equation y equals x squared. So just our basic parabola. Let's make some xy points. If x was negative 1, y would be negative 1 squared, which would be positive 1. If x was 0, y would be 0 as well, because 0 squared is 0. If x was 1, we plugged 1 in up here for x, we'd have y equals 1 squared, which is just positive 1. And so if we were to graph that, negative 1, positive 1 would be a point there, 0, 0 would be a point there, and positive 1 right there. So what happens if instead we've got y equals negative f of x? And in this case, our f of x is x squared. And so we want to graph y equals negative x squared. So we'll do the same thing, make an xy little t-chart. We'll use the same points for x, and then if I replaced x with, here x is negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 would just be 1. So negative 1 squared is 1, but now I'm multiplying by my negative 1. Remember, there's a little imaginary 1 out here. So now I've got positive 1 times negative 1, and now that's negative 1. If I had 0 in here, well, positive 0, negative 0, we don't really need a sign of 0, it's always 0. And then if I was to replace this, replace the x by positive 1 and square it, now I've got 1 squared is 1 times negative 1, which would be negative 1. So now I've got the point negative 1, 0, 0, and positive 1, negative 1, positive 1, negative 1. And so it looks upside down. So we call that a flip about the x-axis. All your x points have now become, all your y points have now become negative. So wherever you had an x originally, you go, we're up here, let's say we went up